The dollar is dropping again. The Chinese have gotten rid of the United States AAA rating as well as Europe. We'll discuss what that means to the layman out there. People say, well, I don't care. I don't buy U.S. bonds. Well, this is the stock of the country. They've passed the Federal Reserve dictatorship takeover in the Senate and the House. And Goldman Sachs has been slapped on the wrist. So we'll talk about it all with Bob Chapman. Bob, good to have you here with us.
Well, thank you very much. Lots of things going on. And I appreciate your comment. Goldman gets slapped in the wrist. It's the only country in the world that I know of where you can steal $5 billion, pay a fine of $550 million. So that means you take about $4.5 billion in profit. And that just proves crime pays in America. It's a terrible example for people in college, especially, and in business, to witness such a thing. 4 months ago, the firm that is run by Mr. Buffett, Berkshire Hathaway, they admitted that they had cheated the United States government, defrauded them out of $300 million, and they paid a $100 million fine and kept the rest. And we can hark back to the late 1980s when we had that scandal, the Milken scandal, and he stole $3 billion, gave $1 billion back to the government, and spent maybe 18 months in jail and lived happily ever after. And, there's two sets of rules, and there's one for us, and the other set of rules are for the Illuminists, and they get away with everything. And it's really disgraceful and disgusting that they get charged chump change.
Well, they do. And, of course, hundreds and hundreds of billions were given to the larger consortiums that they then paid the money out via AIG. When we see numbers in Bloomberg, we haven't got new numbers in 7 months, of $28 trillion meted out to the Federal Reserve and others. In layman's terms, break down the different ways they're looting us and how Bloomberg arrived at the $28 trillion number.
Well, I don't know exactly how they came to that number, but I do know what they do. And number one, which is one of the worst things that they do, is they'll do placements and underwritings and secondaries, and as they place the stock or the bonds, they short it. I mean, here they are convincing people that they should go long bonds in ABC company or stock in XYZ company or a private secondary in OMP company. And the minute the thing is sold, they're shorting the stock or the bond. I mean, they make a lot of money doing that. And this latest fiasco with the dollar, where on the USDX, which is an index of 6 major currencies versus a dollar, it went from having gone down to 74, it went back up to 89. Now, what did that happen? Well, what they did was they were instrumental in exposing Greece. Now, everybody knew who was in Europe and in New York, and they knew Greece should have never been accepted into the Eurozone in the first place. And they had 2 sets of books. And how did they know that? They set the 2 sets of books up for them. And they lied about what they had and that they qualified. And so what they and J.P. Morgan Chase did was that they bet that the euro was going to go down, and they bought the dollar long starting last October. Well, over the last month or 6 weeks, what they've done is covered their short in the euro and sold their long position in the dollar and reaped billions of dollars in profit and almost single-handedly destroyed the Eurozone. Now, the dollar is falling again because they're out of the market. The manipulation is over. And where's the next stop? Well, I think it's selling around 82 right now. So we're probably going to get down and test 74. And it might even break and get down to 71.18, which was the lowest low of all time.
What is that going to mean for gold?
Well, I think it's my feeling that about 14, 15 months ago, gold finally decoupled from the dollar. And that happened because there's a choice there. Do you want to be long gold or long the dollar? The only real currency in the world is gold because it doesn't owe anybody anything. And I think the realization is out there now that gold is better than the dollar. And so I think the reflection of what the dollar does is only 20% into what gold does. And when the big players like Goldman and Morgan see and know that the dollar is going to get down, they deliberately hit gold. They're the ones who are shorting gold today, the two of them. And I'm sure. But
every time they push it down, it just pops back up. And now, what was this London Telegraph report of this secret 380-ton, or very close to the entire gold supply for 1 year, what's mined and refined in 1 year? What was going on with that manipulation?
Well, first of all, I think it's fraudulent. I don't think the event ever happened. I think they're lying.
Well, you've always talked about that. You've always talked about that. You say that what happens there is that they just say it on paper to drive down the price.
Exactly. And it is possible that they've done that, but there's no reason to do it. And first they said a commercial bank was involved, and they don't do business with commercial banks, only central banks. Now, of course, the question arises, the swapper, was it a central bank or a consortium of central banks, or did a consortium exist at all? You see, they won't tell you these things. And because they won't tell you these things, you have to assume that they're lying. There's no other way to go on it. It's just like the CPI and the PPI and the employment figures. They're lies. And so you got to assume that everything else is.
And let's expand.
The BIS is no better.
Bob, I want you to continue on that line, but I want to expand on that in layman terms for people. If banks can sell each other 380 tons of gold secretly, but the higher level areas of the market know what's going on and it's reflected, by selling it at a lower price and it's only on paper, the gold never moves. And that's what GATA and the congressional hearings have all reported on. That's how they manipulate it, because it's a paper transaction that they'll just quietly swap back later. But specifically dealing with secrecy, we have all these congressmen and Senate members saying, we want to know where these trillions went. And the Goldman Sachs people and the head of the Federal Reserve, the Treasury head, they'll never say where it goes. That's an example of this out in the open, incredibly insane secrecy. And now, Ron Paul concurs with me, so does Napolitano reading the bill. I want to get your take on it. But even the Washington Post admits this new bill they've passed, the financial reform, gives the Federal Reserve massive control over the economy and even less oversight by Congress. In the words of the Washington Post, almost total autonomy. So speak to that.
Well, they're absolutely right. And we discussed this a long time ago and multiple times on the program. And they're going to take over the SEC, the CFTC, which is Commodity Futures Trading Corporation, the FDIC, and a new agency, which is for consumer protection. And they're going to have an oversight board, which they appoint the people. It's just like me saying, well, we're going to have a board to oversee talk radio programs, and Alex is going to read it and lead the panel. It's just silly, and it's obfuscation. It's lack of transparency. They don't want you to know what they're doing, because if the public finds out what they're doing, they'll say, well, how can we allow that? And they'll try to stop it. We should be going the other way with the privately owned Federal Reserve. We should be getting rid of it, and of course that's what Ron Paul...
Exactly. Instead of auditing it, instead of abolishing it, they're like, here, total control over everything in the economy, including individuals' debit cards. That's in the bill. And they agreed to not even look at curbing derivatives until 2022.
That's right, which leaves them a long time to do their mischief, and they'll come up with something different at that time. if in fact we've got a government at that time. And these kind of things are what is driving people out of the country. The U.S. government, day before yesterday, imposed a $450 charge on people who want to give up their citizenship. Now, they hadn't had a fee before, but obviously they have a lot of people who are requesting that, and I don't recommend people do that out of hand. And if one were to want to do that, you'd have to have a citizenship in another country before you do that, because you'd never be able to go anywhere because you wouldn't have a passport. So it's something to think about. But this is a reflection of that. And, you know, I get letters all the time. What state do I go to? What country do I go to? How do I get away from this monstrosity?